Hey, Dooberteers, welcome back to the show. Today I'm really excited to have Cheryl from Second Chance come and talk to us. She's got a long history in animal welfare, even though she's only, what, Cheryl, 29 now? So
We'll
we're
go
going
with
to have
that.
a
Yeah.
great conversation listening to how she got started. There's even a book that was written about her organization and where they started. So, Cheryl, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, why don't you start us out? Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your organization.
Well, I started out as an animal control officer and started Second Chance back in 1999. And, it's just grown from there. We started out as an adoption center. We quickly realized that you can never build a shelter big enough for all the animals in need. So we really focused on keeping pets out of the shelter. So what we did was we went and we started doing vaccine clinics and spay neuter programs. And it just exploded to the point where we had to buy a separate building for our veterinary services. And
Wow.
that quickly became full service. And from that hospital, which was opened we bought the building in 2009, we opened it in 2010. And then we just grew. I mean, we opened another hospital, two hospitals in 2015 and one in 16, and then another one in 2020. And we're getting ready to expand one of those hospitals to a new facility because it has outgrown where we are. And we have lots of programs too. So we help 64,000 animals a year now, and they're almost all through the program. Our adoption center is very small. It's 1,100 square feet. And we do, just under 1,500 animals a year through that. But it's our access to care veterinary hospitals that are the big thing. We also we service about 26 food pantries in the area with pet food so that the pets can stay in their home. We have a program for veterans so that if they have to go inpatient services, we hold their animal for up to 90 days. We also help with domestic violence as well. Again, holding the pets for 90 days because many people want to get out of their situation but don't want to leave the pets behind
Right.
and don't have somewhere else that they can go with their pets at that moment in time. So we hold the pets for 90 days. That gives them a chance to find housing and get their pets back. So that's been a very successful program. And the list goes on. We do a lot of community programs for veterinary with, vaccine clinics and, we go into elderly and disabled housing projects and do free vet care. List goes on. And that's how we get up to 64,000 a year.
That is an amazing number. 64,000 animals that you're touching through your services every year. Good for you. I mean, looking back in 1999, did you ever imagine that you would be here?
No, I mean it was just an animal control officer that couldn't find any place to bring animals that were being picked up, and
Yeah.
my house could only hold so many. So that's kind of where it started. And I really was figuring out we'll help, maybe in our long range goals a couple thousand maybe.
Yeah.
We never imagined what we're doing today, and it just keeps growing. And now at this point in my career, a lot of time is spent trying to teach others about this. We do some very, very out of the box thinking here. We use Lean Six Sigma practices, which is for efficiency. So we make sure we have our donor dollars going as far as possible, that we eliminate as much waste in that as possible. A lot of times people focus on money coming in, but forget about the other uh, part of that equation, which is keeping track of what's going out and
Yeah.
trying to use it to the best of your ability.
So looking back when you started this, I mean, what is the leadership lesson that, um, what is the most significant lesson that still influences you today that you've learned along the way?
Well, one of the things that I learned, and I still try to teach people when I do seminars and stuff, is you have to recognize that nonprofits do not have a money tree in the back. They are a business. The only difference is there's no owner, there's nobody taking all the profits. It goes back into the organization. So you have to always think about the financial part and make sure that you are sustainable for the long term. So you have to be financially savvy, and you have to recognize your limitations too. Um, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you should build more hospitals." It's like, no, it's better for me to teach how
Yeah.
to build a hospital and let them do it.
Right. I mean, as the old saying goes, right? Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. I mean, that's so true. I
Yes.
mean, you guys have opened up how many clinics now over the years?
We have four hospitals. We also
Okay.
have two mobile veterinary facilities, vans that we use. We use that mostly for the vaccines and the homebound to the rescue, which is going into the elderly housing. So those are the primary ones.
Okay. I have to say, I really like the focus area. A lot of people go into animal welfare, they start a rescue, and the first thing they do is they try and pull animals from the shelter and put them in foster and get them adopted, right? That is the heartwarming part of things, right? It's got to be a lot harder for you to motivate yourself, to motivate your team with what you're focused on. Tell us a little bit more about those community programs and how you motivate your team to keep going because they're not all just warm snuggle puppy kisses and kitten purrs all the time.
Yeah, it is hard, but I always tell the staff every day at the end of the day when you get in your car to leave, take a moment, 30 seconds, and think about the one life that you changed. It could be that somebody came in thinking to a vet hospital that, I can't afford, my pet's really sick, I can't afford it, I'm going to lose my pet. And then they walk out with their pet and a very small bill, maybe, and they get a longer life with their animal. And sometimes it's hard things, and I've had people come to us years later and say, just have to tell you, when you guys helped me to prolong the life of my pet, by helping me to afford the medications and everything, and then at the end when they were euthanized, you guys were so compassionate. That is a really big thing for the staff. The donors was a harder thing. So many donors are very focused on, they'll help the pet in the shelter all day long. But to say, hey, we want to raise money to build a hospital or to do vaccine clinics, that gets looked at a little differently. It is changing. People are recognizing the messaging that we're getting out there that, yeah, we can keep a pet out of the shelter for, a quarter of the cost or less than bringing
Right.
that pet in the shelter, especially for some significant medical or chronic condition that is going to make that animal very hard to adopt out. But if we can help them to keep the pet and keep it affordable, they're going to keep that pet. And why should we take an animal out of a loving home to try to find it another loving home? It's got a loving home. Let's try to make it work where it is.
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? I mean, all of the data, the hard data shows us that animals do better in a home environment, right? They're less stressed, they're
Mhm.
less sick, they're just more
Yep.
comfortable in that setting. So having them in a foster home, unless they, medically or behaviorally need to be, in a professional environment, is just a much better
Mhm.
option for them.
Absolutely. And the medical and behavioral can both be addressed in the home for the
Sure.
most part. I mean, there's some situations that aren't going to work. They have kids, and the dog is not good with children, or they have another dog, it's not working, or it hates cats and you have a cat. There could be a number of reasons that's not going to work, but it can work in another home. We always have to be conscious of, we want to make sure we're placing pets that are safe in the community and they're in the right home for the right situation. If they don't like other dogs and cats, they should be an only pet. If they're not keen on small kids pulling their tail and pulling their ears, they shouldn't be with kids. I mean, it's
Right.
just a responsible thing to do.
So now, before you started Second Chance, you, as you mentioned, were an animal control officer. So I'm curious, how did you get into that? Was there a specific event, an animal, a situation that compelled you to want to go down that path?
It's a pretty funny story. So at the time, I was a single mom with three kids, and I was engaged to get remarried, and we had a pup. He had brought home a puppy for one of my kids' second birthday, and it was just really funny. This dog was an escape artist, and he got out all the time. So I was picking that dog up, and as a single mom, it was very expensive to get a dog out of doggy jail. So I got to know them. They were very, very nice couple. And finally one day he goes, "Look," he said, "I need an assistant. You want to be an assistant?" And I said, "Sure." It was a little extra side money. I'll do it. I love animals. And as soon as I got into it, a year later, he goes, "Well, I'm retiring, so here you go."
There you
So
go.
I ended up with yeah, with the full job. And as time went on, I did multiple towns, and I actually did that job for 25 years. I
Wow.
retired 7 years ago, so I was doing both for a while. And so it was kind of funny, the situation happens. I mean, I love that dog dearly, but the kid having three kids, they left the door open, or
Sure.
we're looking out the window and open the door to look at the sunshine or something, and there goes the dog.
Yeah.
So that's how I actually ended up in it.
That's awesome. So I'm very curious to know about this book. You said there was a book that was actually written about the start of your organization. How did that come about?
So many people, when they hear about how quickly Second Chance has grown, what our focus is, how different we are from pretty much every other animal welfare organization. And it started out as a joke, and my husband was like, listen, let's write a book. And I was very hesitant to write it, because, to write a book, you have to talk about the backstory, how it started, all this other stuff. And I really didn't want to put my personal information out there.
Yeah.
But after 8 years and I did a lot of rescue missions across the country, and everybody loved to hear those stories. And I said, you know what, let's go ahead and do it. And we did it because I was hoping people that read it would see that, it's one person starting something, and then people jump in, and next thing you know, you have an army out there saving animal lives. And it's not as hard as people make it to be. Like, you can make a difference whether you're one person, that can only donate a couple hours a day or a week, and you can start it out. I mean, when I started out, I mean, it was running out of my dining room for years. My sunroom had all the dogs with the puppies. I was the foster for them. I mean, that's how it starts. And then if you are driven and get people that join you as you go along, you can really make a big difference.
Yeah, that leadership, that motivation is infectious, right? People want to follow somebody that has a vision and knows because,
Mhm.
I always tell
Mhm.
people half the time, I don't know what I'm doing. I kind of make it up as I go, right? But,
Yep. Yep.
it's just,
Absolutely.
yeah, you make the decisions with the best information you have. And sometimes you look back and you go, well, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. Have
Yep.
there been any
Yep.
lesson learns or oopsies that, along your journey for the last few years that you want to share?
Well, one of the things is I've learned that you have to, in this journey, you can't be the tanker that can't move. You have to be the speedboat that can make turn on a dime. And you have to make those changes quickly and not lament them. And sometimes you have to make the decision that's right for the organization, and understand that sometimes you're going to get pushback from people. You're going to get people that don't agree with you. But if you're doing the right thing, you just keep going. You just keep going, and that's all you can do. I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, well, I don't want to upset this person, or,
Yeah.
geez, if I do this, this is a big change, and people don't like change. And you have to say, listen, this is the right thing to do. This is what we're going to do. And you have to admit that if you do something and it's not the right thing, you need to say, you know what? Really messed up. We need to do this differently. This is not working. And be willing to accept it. I was just giving advice to another group not that long ago, and they are running out of money. And I said, you need to refocus your efforts, and otherwise. And they're like, well, we don't want to do that. We want to help everybody. I said, well, you're going to help nobody if you don't
Right.
change. And you can't. I know you want to help everybody. Everybody wants to help everybody, but you have to be realistic about your focus.
Yeah, that's really good advice because so many people enter into this and it's overwhelming when you look at the number
Is
of animals and the number of situations and there's always another animal in need. There's always another person that needs your help and you can easily burn out. And to your point, if you don't have a focus,
100%.
people don't know you. Why would I call you, right? What do I call you for? We all like to put things in a bucket, right? I call Uber and Lyft when I
Yes.
need a ride. I don't call Uber and Lyft,
Yes.
when I'm looking for a flight, right? Like you need a bucket to put them in.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's really good advice for people. I mean, I'm curious, what is the advice that people ask you for the most?
They ask me how we do it. They look at our budget and they're like, the cost per animal is pretty low, and how do you do it? And then I tell them about Lean Six Sigma, which is very foreign to a lot of people.
Sure.
I was blessed that my husband, he, for a living, I mean, he was a CEO of major companies. And one of the things he did later in his career is he went into failing companies and turned them around. And a lot of it, he said, was, people don't like change, and sometimes you need to pull the band-aid off on certain things and do them. You need to look at where your waste is and stuff. And he said it was so easy for me. He said, because you're a new set of eyes looking at things. You don't have any emotional attachment to anything or anybody, and you make the hard decisions that other people didn't want to make. And I always tell people, if you're going to lead an organization, you need to be the one to make the hard decisions. And you can't just worry about, well, they're not going to like me because I'm going to do
Right.
this. I have to make this decision. They're not going to like you if the organization fails either.
Yeah.
And the other advice, which my husband gave me many years ago, was never do anything that you wouldn't want on the front page of the Boston Globe or the New York Times.
Yeah.
Even if it's right, but it may not look right, don't do it. Like, you want to be 100% transparent. You want everything, you want to be able to explain everything you're doing. Because I mean, people will come out at you with stuff like, why don't you build a bigger shelter? I don't think that's right. You don't build a bigger shelter, you're not helping animals. And you have to go in and explain, hey, this is what we're doing. We're, keeping animals in the home. I've had people come to me and say, well, if they can't afford an animal, they shouldn't have it.
Oh,
And I said,
I've heard
and I
that.
was like, okay, well, let's talk about that. I'm one, I'm not going to argue with people. I want to talk to them. And I was like, well, what about your elderly grandmother? Your grandfather passed away.
Sure.
This cat is her whole life. Well, yeah, you should help her. And I said, what about the single mom? Husband left her. You have 3 kids. You have a dog that your kids love, needs medical care. You don't have a lot of money. Should they give up their pet? Well, no, you should help them. And we go through the thing. By the end, they're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You're right. It doesn't, a few dollars can make a huge difference. And people get it. I mean, I've heard story after story in our vet hospitals where people come in. We get a lot of transfers from emergency hospitals because they can't afford the surgery because it's a foreign body. Their dog swallowed a corn cob,
Mm.
or a pyometra, which is an infection of the uterus. Those are big, expensive things. And they'll be
Sure.
sitting, we're working with them with grants and money and making it all work. And, we are usually sometimes 5, 6 times less money than the other hospitals, at least a quarter less, 3/4 less. But there's still an expectation that they're going to
Yeah.
pay something. And
Sure.
sometimes the people in the lobby will come forward and say, here, put a couple hundred on my credit card. So people are getting it now. They're understanding, giving somebody $200 for a surgery that we're going to charge 1,000 for, that others charge 8 or 10 for. This is keeping that dog with that pet. We still have to charge something because I've got 26 veterinarians, I've got 100
Wow.
staff. It's a lot to run 4 hospitals. You have to, not everybody can work for free. So,
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. So, but so they have some financial input into it, but at the same time, it's a bunch of people putting a few dollars in that makes the difference. And it's easier for them to give a few $100s towards $1,000 surgery than try to raise $8,000 for that surgery.
Yeah. Every little bit helps. I think that's a great
It
story,
does.
right? When people start coming together for strangers that they don't even know, right? And say, look,
Yep.
put $200 on my credit card, even though I can't afford it, but
Mhm.
they need it more than me. And it's just that pay it forward
Mhm.
mentality and understanding that there's other people out there. It's got to be a heartwarming thing
Yep.
to see.
It is. And the people feel really good about it because they're like, wow, I kept that pet from, being euthanized somewhere else. And I was able to keep that pet. I mean, we've had people come from multiple states away because there's no services where they are. And they come, the one, it would happen to be a friend of mine who was at one of our vet hospitals getting her dog taken care of for some, just a regular routine visit. And she was watching this guy, and he had been to 5 or 6 places, been turned away. He was going out to his car to find change. He had multiple credit cards. He was trying to figure out what he could take on each one. The surgery was $800 where we were. It was 6,000. He had been quoted 6,000. It was
Wow.
800 here. We were helping him. We had found a few $100s in a grant that he qualified for. And my friend went up and just said, didn't say make a big deal or anything, and just said to the receptionist, because she's in there all the time because she has a sick pet, and she said, just put $500 down on my credit card towards this. So in the end, the guy only had to come up with $100 because we found $200 in a grant for him. I didn't know it was her, and I was out, hanging out with her, and she was telling me the story, and I was like, oh my God, I heard that story. Like that went through the whole hospital, and how great that was, because this
Yeah.
guy had come. It was a 7-month-old puppy that had swallowed, I don't remember what it was, might have been a corn cob because that seems to be popular.
Yeah.
And he loved this dog, and he had come from 2 states away because he had heard about us. And so, he was there all day, and at the end of the day, he took his puppy home, and that was all that mattered.
That's a great story. Those are the ones that keep you going. Those are the ones you share with the staff and the public to say, look, what
Yeah,
we're doing really means something here. So as we start
yeah.
coming towards the end here, Cheryl, let's pivot into a lightning round where we can ask some questions and learn a little bit more about you personally. So you ready?
Yep.
All right. Puppy breath or kitten purrs?
Puppy breath.
Puppy breath. All right. Are you an early bird or a late night owl?
Very early bird.
Very
4:30
early.
a.m.
Okay. Now I got to know how early is early?
4:30 a.m. is when my dogs start trying to wake me up.
Okay. They're like, Mom, let's go. Get going. Nice.
That's it.
If you had one word to describe your shelter team, your team of people, what would it be?
Innovative.
Ooh, good choice. I like that. Always looking for something new and trying to find new ways. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're always coming to me with, hey, if we do this, we can help more pets, or we can, save a little money and do this, or we can do this better. So.
Yeah. What's the most unexecutive thing you've had to do this week? Mop the floor or clean a litter box?
Well, right now, after I get off here, I'm actually going to our development office to put baskets together for our dinner auction coming up.
There you
And they
go.
asked me to do it because, yeah, I haven't done them for a few years, but they said, we really love when you do them, and we've got a lot of stuff. Can you make those gift baskets again? So that's one of the things I'm doing.
Nice. I love that. What is the one thing you like to do to decompress after a hard day at the grind?
One of my dogs and I like to take a walk. It's about 3 miles. We walk up to, there's a Cumberland Farms gas station, and I get a cup of tea and I walk back. And she is well known in this community for those walks. She loves those walks, and I love to just take a break, do that walk,
Nice.
relax. So.
I love that. And finally, Cheryl, I mean, you and I talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but what's the legacy that you want to leave behind?
I really want people to, if you want to save animals, to really think about doing it as efficiently as possible. It comes from the heart, but there has to be a thought process in it. And, I spend a lot of time now in my later career with other people trying to teach them. It's like we talked about, you can give somebody a fish and they eat for a day, or teach them the fish and they can eat for life. And it's the same thing. Like we don't intend to, while we're getting a bigger hospital for one of our hospitals, we don't intend to build more hospitals and things like that. I'd rather spend the time teaching others, that way all across the country they can use Lean Six Sigma and open access to care and keep pets out of the shelter in the first place.
Yeah.
That's my
No, I
thing.
think it's a great way to approach it. So, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story and what motivates you and your leadership lessons. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.